Welcome back to the Beat the Often Path podcast, the show where we highlight unusual success stories to help us all think outside the box in life and in our careers. My guest today is someone just a little bit close to me. My wife is on the show, the one and only Maruja Retana. I wanted to bring her on because she has a fascinating success story that will appeal to so many of you. She started out as a psychologist, then became a professional singer, becoming a finalist in Dutch X Factor, getting a few radio hits under her belt, and performing routinely for thousands of people each weekend. But a few years ago, she realized that many singers and songwriters suffered from the same problems, both internal and external, so she became a coach for other artists, creating her vocal psychology program. Now, she's spoken for Sony and more, and she's mentored tons of people, so this episode is really for you if you've ever thought about switching careers, or if you just aren't sure how seemingly different aspects of your life can fit together into a new vision. So here's Maruja Retana joining me in the studio.
Yeah.
So we're doing things a little bit differently. For the first time, we're doing an interview that's not a Zoom call. We're doing one in person, which feels kind of weird.
We were, we were kind of thinking I could be in the living room, but this seemed better.
Yeah, we could have faked a Zoom call, but it seemed like, why would you do that and suffer the quality loss when we're literally in the same house, locked down together? So, why did I have you here other than sheer laziness on my part? Some might say it's because I took a vacation and was unable to book a guest this week and ended up with a hole in the schedule. Some might say that, but they'd be wrong. The real reason that I did this is because I think you have an unusual success story as well. And I think it's a story that will apply to a lot of people out there, or might motivate a lot of people who tune into this podcast for ideas.
Thank you. That's very nice.
So give us an arc overview of how you ended up doing what you're currently doing.
Okay. So, I started my career as a psychologist in Holland. Before I became a psychologist, I always wanted to be a singer. But I grew up in this really small town in Holland. And I just thought, that is just not possible for me. What else can I do? I love people. I love stories. I love figuring things out. And that's how I ended up studying psychology. And then after I graduated and I got my master's degree, I started working as a psychologist. But I was kind of, with one foot in music business, one foot in psychology world. And I met this young man who told me not to give up my dream. And
who was he? I'll kill him.
You don't know him.
Oh, okay.
He's way more handsome than me.
Yeah, that's true. Was he balding prematurely? No,
he had a lot of hair.
He had a lot of hair. Okay, got it.
But no, you were really one of the people who convinced me to chase my dream, and I did, and that's when I became a singer-songwriter. And I did some really cool stuff for a few years. And then I noticed that the psychology part was really, needed some attention. And, I needed a lot of inner work as a singer and a songwriter, because I felt so insecure and I felt so nervous about all the things that I was doing. And I felt like I was an imposter. And so I needed to do a lot of inner work and help myself a lot to still, feel good on that stage and in the studio. And I thought I was the only one, but I was not. Almost all my peers felt the same way. So I created a program called the Vocal Psychology Program. And with that program, I help other singers and songwriters overcome the same obstacles that I did. So.
Yes. Well, it's a classic example of the Steve Jobs quote, you can only connect the dots looking backward, not looking forward.
Yeah.
Because for many years, you had no clue how this study that you did, how the psychology training and a master's degree in psychology related in any capacity to the art that you wanted to make, the singing that you wanted to do, the songs that you wanted to write. Mm-hmm. And of course, like so many other people in life, you found that merging those two things together created something.
Yeah. No, that's true.
Different.
It feels so funny talking to you. But yeah, for a really long time.
Professionalism. This show is all about professionalism.
But yeah, for a really long time, it felt like two different worlds. And you know that. It felt like I had to be one person in this world and one person in the other world. But really, I started thriving when I felt like myself in both worlds, and when I could see like how this influences that and that influences this. So I would say that, even in my songwriting, I use a lot more psychology now, and I really try to use what I learned as a psychologist in my music, and of course the other way around. I learned so much about how to think like a successful singer, and that's what I, of course, offer my clients in the program.
So now you do mentoring, but what else do you do? What is the work that you do at the moment?
Well, it's a lot of coaching.
Yeah. When you say coaching, one-on-one coaching.
One-on-one coaching, yeah,
via
exactly.
Skype during the pandemic, but also before the pandemic in person, and also recording sessions.
Yeah, exactly. So one-on-one coaching.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also setting up a group program for songwriters. And besides that, I still write songs. And I'm a mother. Did you know that?
I didn't know that. That's shocking information. Yeah. I guess that makes me a father then.
Yeah, so it's a lot of sharing information also with social media, and starting to do speaking gigs now. So I'm trying to share the knowledge and the information.
Well, it's also funny how things come full circle, and how some of the things that you start, you don't know where they're going to end up. And I think that's why it's such a good story for this podcast, is because, now we're very used to the pandemic and all of this stuff. Everybody has been struggling. Mm-hmm. And it's been interesting to see how people are recognizing now what you've always been saying. Because of the pandemic, now they're more aware that other songwriters and singers are struggling mentally and emotionally. Yeah. People are more aware that people need help or therapy, especially creative people, that it's incredibly hard to create all the time and avoid, especially when money is attached to your creation, when you need to create, and when you're getting so much pressure from record labels and people who are only business minded to say, give me that next hit, produce, more money. Mm-hmm. And you're sitting there trying to reach into your soul when you're exhausted and you don't feel like it. Yeah. So your skills have become a lot more relevant in the eyes of the rest of the world, would you say?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I think amongst songwriters and singers, it was already pretty known in recent years, like, we're all struggling, but the pandemic has definitely, made things worse. And I think for a long time, people on the corporate side were like, yeah, this is not our problem. We're not psychologists. Everyone just has to figure it out on their own. But we're losing money. We're losing lives in the worst case. And so, yeah, I love how much more open people are now, record labels, publishers, to, providing supports and the services to help creatives, because I always say, it's your job to express your emotions. So it would make a lot of sense if you would get the support to process your emotions and turn them into gold.
Mm-hmm. Well, why do you think that has not been there historically? We look at documentaries, we look at Avicii died, all of these people died. Amy Winehouse died at the age of 27. It's almost like we as a society take pleasure in watching our celebrities suffer, or we think somehow because Amy Winehouse was rich and famous that she deserved to be in so much hell, or that it's okay that she killed herself when she's 27 years old. Yeah. Why do you think that there's always been that kind of relationship with people who seem to have everything, who are young, Avicii touring the world, and yet inside they're struggling so much?
Yeah. Well, I think there are a few fallacies, a few thought mistakes. I think one of them is that one of them used to be that, that's an exception. But studies have shown that actually at least 75% of all creatives suffer from mental health issues. So it's a lot more common than we used to believe. And then the second thing is that I think there's this myth that depression is necessary to be creative, you know, and that all creatives should be depressed almost, and that's where you get your where you get your art from.
The tormented artist.
Exactly. Yeah.
Stereotype. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know that's not really true. What is true is that people who are depressed and creative people tend to think a lot. You know, we know all about that.
I don't know. I never think. Not a thought goes on in this brain. I hit the pillow and it's straight to bed. What is there to think about?
Exactly.
What do I know about pouring your heart and soul into a creative endeavor to get nothing back? Nothing.
Yeah, exactly. I rest my case. So yeah, the real thing is that it's what they call rumination. That is the link there. But you definitely do not need to be depressed to be creative. But what is true is that when you get out of a depression, that's when you can become more creative. So not when you are depressed, but when you overcome your obstacles, you know? Mm-hmm. So that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to accelerate that upswing. Mm-hmm. And then the third thing, wait, I lost my train of thought. I don't remember. I had a really good point, I swear.
We'll come back to it.
It'll come back.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so that's the myth of the depressed, or we talked about why do these people kill themselves, or why are successful people still depressed?
Yeah. Well, okay, the third one came to me. I think people underestimate the kind of the burden of success. So as you get further away from your comfort zone, your baseline, whether that's really depressed or really successful, it feels unsafe, you know, and you're not used to things working out. You're not used to all the things that come with success. And, you know, when you start out, you often think, you have these goals, you know, and when I reach that, then I'll be happy. Then my life will work out. And that's just not true, because it's not in the goal. It's in how you are. And so oftentimes, as people get more successful, they get more unhappy because you feel so restless and so hopeless. And so, like, why am I not happy? So, yeah, and I think there's zero support for successful people, because everyone's like, what are you whining about? You know, you have all that you dreamed of and that everyone else dreams of. But that's not really what makes people happy. So,
yeah, it's interesting how we have a cycle as a culture that we know the cycle of any artist from a distance. Yeah. We know when they're coming up, we root for them, and we're like, oh, can't wait. Like, look at Russ. He made it all on his own. He did it. And how cool is it that he wrote and mixed and mastered his own song? Like, they rise up, they get the stadium tour, or Lil Nas X, you know, they rise up, and we're so happy that the underdog finally made it.
Yeah.
And then once they're not the underdog anymore, they have a period of success, and then they start getting just attacked from all angles. And now Lil Nas X is like the devil, and he's leaning into that. He's doing a great job. But they're, you know, then suddenly they're the devil. Suddenly they're the worst ever. Suddenly they're getting stalkers or all of these other really negative things that come from attention. And then the last part of the cycle is that we watch them either go bankrupt or suffer or kill themselves in the worst case. And this is just what we've come to expect from celebrity or from art. And it's totally normal. It's totally fine. And the record labels and all of the people profiting off of this, they're like, oh, okay, we'll just find the next Avicii. We'll find the next Amy Winehouse. Yeah. We don't like Lorde anymore, but guess what we have? We have Billie Eilish now. She's young and depressed. She'll be good with those kids. And when she's done, then we'll find a new the Generation Double Z person who thinks that all the Gen Z people are idiots and will complain about that.
It's so true, and I'm laughing, but it's really not
It's
funny.
No, it's horrible.
It's so bad, but
we're
it's funny because it's true. That's exactly what happens. But yeah, I don't know. I'm really hoping that things are going to change now. I mean, you see that my publisher, Sony ATV, for instance, they seem to really care, and I think other publishers too. So yeah, let's hope things are going to change quick because it's necessary.
Because it's very necessary. And people do seem to be more open to these ideas.
Yeah.
And whether it's coming from within or from the external pressures of our society, they do seem to be more responsive at a business level to listening to these things.
Yeah.
But you have worked with tons and tons of artists at this point. What are some of the common traits that you've noticed in the people you've worked with?
In terms of what?
Just what are some of the characteristics? So when you help people on their journey, what are some of the common things that artists, that singers or writers that they're struggling with?
Yeah. Okay.
Are there universal things that everybody is struggling with, or
well, okay. Let's see. How can I unpack this? So usually when people kind of start out, there's a lot of imposter syndrome. A lot of like, I'm not a real singer. And it's funny how that never really goes away. So I've worked with a ton of more established artists in Holland. And, there's still a part of them that's like, what am I doing here? Do I really belong here? And I think, what are some obstacles in more established artists? Well, I guess that what I just mentioned, that you have these goals that you achieve, and there is still not the fulfillment that you expected would be there. What I personally also think is that it's super rare for established artists to really how do I say this? I think it's really rare for any artist, honestly, to be super, to be really good at emotional delivery. So there's a lot of achieving, and there's a lot of like flexing, this is what I can do, a lot of tricks. But there are not a lot of people who can, like an Adele or something, who can really, really, really connect to an emotion and then, present that to an audience and create that synergy that you want. So that's a big part of what I'm trying to do. Like, you're here to tell a story. You're here to, to share an emotion with people.
Sure.
And that's usually because it's hard to face your own emotions, to... Am I going too psychological
no,
for you?
That's what, it's a long format interview.
I have a lot to say. But yeah, the better you are at, dealing with your own emotions, the better you are as an artist that, that creates that connection with your audience.
Okay, so let's rewind. So when you were doing psychology work, before art and psychology were connected in any way in your career, again, this is about unusual success stories. So how do people get from point A to B? How does a banker go to being a DJ banker? Or how do you transition? So when you were just doing psychology, before music was a part of it, when they were completely separate, what were you doing then?
I was doing little things. So I was in an a cappella group. I was in a band.
I guess I mean in psychology. I'm talking about purely psychology.
Yeah.
Forget music.
Okay.
What were you doing in psychology before you ever had this idea?
All right. So I was working at this training company. Let me try to make this really interesting. So basically what I was doing is I was helping people who weren't really happy in their jobs. I would help them achieve goals. I would try to figure out with them, like, what are you missing in life, and how do you want to go from A to B, really? So the same thing as what I'm doing now, except not in music.
But it was like groups of people.
It was groups of people.
And what was the format?
Well, it was actually really fun because it was very outdoorsy. There was literally like a pit that you had to you had to literally get from A to B within a certain time frame with certain tools, and you had to, figure out who's my teammate here, who should be the leader, and what's my role in this group, what's my personal goal, do I want to, what's the personal obstacles I want to overcome, do I want to be more vocal, do I want to, be less dominant, and those were all like metaphoric
metaphors for
how to tackle the bigger obstacles in your life. So that's
and who is paying for this? Who are the clients that were booking this company?
Bigger companies, usually like Philips or
And what is it, like a week-long program, or how long was the program?
It was a really intense, like a 4-day or 3-day, I don't even remember, 3 or 4 day program. Yeah, it was really like from 7 a.m. to like 10 p.m.
So for 1 week, it would be the Philips week.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And then the next week, it would be Heineken.
Yeah, exactly.
Somebody else.
This would be a great TV show, by the way, with
I'm
like
sure
celebrities. Yeah,
Celebrity
it might
Challenge.
be.
Yeah, it probably already is. We just don't watch enough TV.
We never watch
They're like,
TV.
oh, you mean Celebrity Tar Pit?
Celebrity
Featuring Nicki Minaj. Anyway. Okay, so companies, now, do you think that they were really hoping to get change out of this, or was it just something that companies felt like they should do?
Well,
Because it looks good and it's tax deductible.
Right. I think there was a lot of that, honestly, because I believed in this company so much, because they did such profound work and people's lives would change. But companies, they just go for the quick buck usually, and especially back then. So it was hard to find clients because, again, companies were like, why is this our problem? But yeah, again, I'm glad that companies are starting to see that it's also part of your responsibility to take care of mental health issues. So yeah, it was a struggle back then. Yeah.
And that brings up another point. So you're starting to get into music on the side. Mm-hmm. You're doing dance records, various things as a vocalist, often for other people's music before you're writing your own. You were writing your own, but your first paid gigs were on top of other people's stuff. So what kind of things did you start noticing? Maybe explain a little bit about that journey.
Noticing where?
In the singing journey, like what you started noticing things about how people treat artists, or maybe women in art role. Like what?
We're gonna get into this. Yeah.
Well, a little bit at least. I mean, you don't have to go super deep, but I'm trying to connect these things because otherwise it seems like a not logical progression. You know. So what is the logical progression from training people for companies to I want to be a singer to how I'm doing these things together?
Right.
So like let's tell that journey a little bit.
Well, okay, the struggles that I had as a singer. Well, okay. There was a lot of misogyny. There was a lot of I think, especially as a starting artist, you feel like you have to prove yourself so much. You feel like you're dependent on a lot of people. And that, if you're going to say no, there are like 20 other people who are going to say yes. So, of course, that's a beautiful, that's a great, a great opportunity for people who want to take advantage of women or artists, doesn't have to be women. To be a-holes. I don't know if I can swear on this podcast.
Swear.
Swear. So, sometimes you get into situations that afterwards you're like, I can't believe that happened to me. Mm-hmm. And I think something that you taught me actually is that you should always climb your own mountain. So there's never one particular person that you need. So yes, as an artist, you need a producer, you need a mixer, you need maybe a record or someone to distribute your music, but you never need that specific person. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So I really started adopting that mindset of I'm always climbing my own mountain, because back then it felt like, oh, I need this person. I have to be nice to this person, even though they're doing this and this, or they're saying things like this. You know, and yeah, I'm really glad that the Me Too movement, you know, happened, because finally things are out in the open. I don't think there's a real solution for it yet, but it sure has improved a lot. But yeah, back then that was one of the things. Me Too. And
ageism as well. You know, if we don't sign a record deal before you're 30 years old, forget about it. Before you're 25 years old, forget about it.
Yeah, and I was pretty old. I started when I was like 28 or something like that.
That's way too old.
Yeah. I didn't experience so much ageism, but definitely sexism.
Yeah.
Yeah, does that answer your question?
Okay, so you've experienced these things, and there were some moments, I can say witnessing, there were moments that were very hard. Some great moments came. I mean, you started performing, you're performing for sometimes 10,000 people at a time. You had songs on the radio, some mini hits. We got flown to Ibiza to perform. You performed for a soccer official anthem for the football match, which was an amazing highlight. So you did a lot of these things that were really cool and that a lot of people haven't done. Really great stuff. But there was something else that was happening, kind of like we talked about in the beginning, alongside some of the more negative things, or, you know, people treating you badly from the record label, or abusing their position of power, or so there was this duality between things going really well on the one hand, and I think on the other hand it was the hardest time for you personally, emotionally, which is kind of interesting.
No, that's true. And I think a lot of that was, at the end of the day, was me you know, actually not having a strong enough mindset. You know, I think my best year professionally was 2014. That's when we were flown out and did all that cool stuff. But I felt so depressed. And I think it was because of that thing where I had all these goals for myself, you know, and something was just not fulfilled. So I think that was an important year for me for many reasons. And I'm now really strong up here, you know. I think I can handle a lot more now. What else? Are you hinting at something?
Well, no, I guess. Well, one of the moments that I remember that you know we don't talk about much, but when you had that song that came out on Spinning Record, it got like 1 million plays in the first 24 hours or something like that. That was by far the biggest, fastest. I mean, it's and for those of you who haven't experienced this, it's the exact opposite of what I make now, where where I get like 3 plays in 4 weeks. You know, it all starts the same. You know, a record label puts a video online. I mean, you can put a video online, you can post on social media. The difference was 1 million people watched this within 24 hours. And it was such a weird feeling, because you're refreshing this thing, watching the views go up and up and up, and the comments come in. Some of them are positive. Some of them are horrible, like kill yourself, die.
It
like,
really went from you're ugly to you're a goddess. And
you're the ugliest person I've ever seen. Like you sound like horrible, like just awful things, good things. And all I know is like after 24 hours, you just feel weird.
We were exhausted.
It was so weird. And like, you don't know what to make of it. Like on the one hand, you're happy that it's got traction and that it's like a hit kind of thing. But then on the other hand, you're like, what? And I think that's something that very few people that, you know, I don't profess to understand this even now, but when people think about celebrity, and especially in the internet age, the floodgates open.
Oh my God.
And they're weird.
Yeah, because that was like a tiny taste. Imagine being like Billie Eilish.
Imagine getting 1 billion views.
Oh
and
my God.
The hate and death threats and horrible things. And And I think we, as a culture, have this belief that celebrity is just positive things, or that getting more famous is positive. It's like, oh, I get more money and recognition is good.
Yeah.
But when you see firsthand how recognition and money, like how bad it is. I mean, now there's doxing, there's swatting, there's all of these things that people do to even minor YouTube celebrities. They're getting the police called on and stuff like that. You see that there's a huge downside to being famous in any capacity. And it's really, really hard. And I've always thought for myself personally, like, and we've talked about this a lot, but being famous is not either one of our goals.
No.
And in fact, it's something that I actively, I would say, fear. I really don't want to be famous because I don't want all that baggage.
It's not something to strive for.
But I do like creating stuff.
Yeah.
So I create because I like to create. But like, if anything, being famous scares the shit out of me, honestly, because it just seems like so much more hassle. I think the easiest life is one who's not known, who's like think of a Warren Buffett type, just collecting money in the background, making billions. I think that's the easiest life.
Yeah, exactly.
Being in the public eye is clearly.
No, I think fame is not. I think it's great to be celebrated. Now, of course, I'm grateful for everyone who loved those songs, and but you just can't give it too much weight. You can't. Fame is just not a goal. It's not tangible. It doesn't get you anything, It just... I think it's so important to just stay grounded and keep creating. That's what you're here to do, to create. And if it resonates, fantastic. And if it doesn't, it's not for you. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
So now I want to switch into another gear. So at this point, we've kind of covered the first 2 stages of the 3 stages. But the third stage... And I think with a lot of people, there's a break or there's a shift when somebody makes a decision to switch their focus or to switch their career in a meaningful way.
Yeah.
This is the hardest part, I think. So it starts with a decision of, okay, I'm going to leave that behind and I'm going to do something else.
Yeah.
But then there's this dip or this lull or this period after one makes that decision where nothing makes sense anymore, because if you define your life as an artist, as a singer, and then one day you're like, okay, I'm going to be a coach for these people, or I'm going to focus on this other thing, and I'm going to bring my psychology degree. Of course, the fans, and there's a lot of people for whom that's a disappointment or whatever, because it's like, oh, why did you stop focusing on this thing that I knew you for, and you start focusing on another thing? And I think this is something that will resonate with a lot of people out there, because they may have ambitions to switch to something else. Let's say, you've been, just for an example, an accountant your whole life, and you want to switch to being an artist or to be a vocalist or whatever. There's a big transition that occurs when family and friends and people who have to get used to the new you, the new image of you. And of course, like everything else in life, it's not purely positive. It's not all supportive. It's not like, oh, great. You're not going to focus on making radio hits anymore. You're going to focus on helping people. And so there's
so
a giant but that's the world. That's the world we live in, even if you're an artist and you make an album that's slightly different than the other album, they're already yelling at, like, how dare you abandon yours. I'm still an artist. I made a different album. So you transition, and I think it's worth noting that transition period is hard and tough and requires insane amounts of effort, because it's like a giant ship moving in one direction and you want to move it in the opposite or a different direction. First you have to slow the thing down, which takes forever, and then you have to build up new momentum and move it in a new direction. So how did that part go when you decided, okay, I actually want to change to my focus?
I guess the biggest change for me was from psychologist to singer. That felt like a change to me, because I was never super vocal about wanting to be an artist, and it felt almost like I can't say that I'm an artist. That felt really weird. It felt like a fictional profession. And I remember that I just kind of took a year to transition. I was still working, but I spent all... Do you remember when we spent all of our time just analyzing songs and just really trying to hone our skills? And I guess, I don't know if I've ever been super sensitive to what people think of me in that way. Like, I've always had the attitude of it. Well, this is my life, you know.
Yeah.
It's not your. You don't have any say in this.
Yep.
And I think when I don't feel like I transitioned so much. I just kind of added to, not added, but definitely my focus is now more on coaching than on being an artist, obviously. But it doesn't feel like I'm closing the door on one thing and opening one to another. It just feels like it's all one thing now.
Right.
And sorry, and I think, I don't know, maybe I'm just really egocentric, but I don't think other people should decide for me what I do with my life. You know what I mean?
Sure. Well, I guess in addition to the opinions, I mean, I think building momentum in something new is hard.
Yeah. Oh, that's what you're trying to do.
And I think that is why a lot of people struggle, because it's hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
Building new momentum in a new thing when your whole life has been something else. Building new momentum is really, really tough.
That's true. Yeah. No,
and I think that's something that is hardly discussed in the motivational social media sphere.
Yeah.
You know, we all talk about, quit your job, do this, follow your dreams, pursue,
but how?
Very few people talk about the practicality.
Then,
and I love that everybody trying to sell you something is always like, you know, it took me 4 years to get my first high-paying client, but I can help you if you just pay me $5,000. And it's like, can you?
Yeah.
Because I kind of feel like it's going to take 4 years for anybody who defines themselves as something new. And 4 years is a long time.
Yeah.
4 years of worrying and wondering and, you know, when your bills don't ever stop. 4 years is a long time. And these things take years.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the crazy part. So how did you decide that this was something that was worth committing to for an extended period of time?
The coaching part. Yeah. Well, just because I knew that I needed it so much, and I basically just wanted to create the program that I needed back then. You know, there were so many moments of, I don't know how to do this. And not just like it was practical things like, how do I create a demo? I had no idea. But also, how do I, you know, behave in a writing session? What is normal? How, you know, do contracts, like, how do I be great on stage, not just singing a song, but really, you know, entertaining an audience? How do I do the same when I'm in the studio, when there's no audience? There is so much that you have to figure out. So, that's why I created this program. And I think you're right. I kind of grew in my coaching skills as well. Like in the beginning, you only have your own experience, but the more clients you have, the more broad your knowledge becomes, because you see all these examples of different people. But
patterns.
So I think you can learn strategies, and obviously I teach strategies too. And but it takes a little time, and that's okay.
Well, and one of the interesting things. That's hard for all of us, though. It's hard for all of us.
It is. Yeah,
hard
everyone is impatient.
But I think one of the greatest things that's come out of it is that I think, and part of the reason that doing this is so valuable, I think, is because, especially when you're young, you're very, very alone. And when you're in a studio with other people, like you can't stress how alone an artist or a young female artist is in the world, because we generally, as good people, we want to trust other people. I think there's a strong desire to trust the process, trust the system, trust those in authority, and just, you know, because I'm a good person, I trust that other people will treat me that way. And we systematically found in our own life, from separately, that is just simply not the case. I mean, I got stabbed in the back in the most horrible way. Like just evil people who go so far beyond human decency. And so it's a classic example of what you don't know can hurt you and will hurt you most of the time. Somebody says, here, sign this contract. And you sign it. I mean, you've got people, even I think Kanye most recently, but you've got major hip hop artists, you know, posting their contracts online saying you took advantage of me, or it was like modern slavery, you know. And these are big artists. These aren't even imagine how much the little people are getting screwed all of the time in deals that they don't understand. Also, like you said, etiquette in terms of what you're supposed to do or how you're supposed to behave in a closed studio room where you've got, let's say, 3 adult men in a closed room and a young girl, and they're smoking weed or drinking the entire time, and like what is supposed to happen in this creative environment, you know? So there's so much of this, like, what do I do? What am I supposed to feel? What am I supposed to think? Very, very alone. And that's why I think that the mentorship and coaching is so, so necessary, because you just simply don't know what's out there. And one thing I noticed from you when you were doing this is that as you talk to more and more people and as you know, either interviewing industry professionals or contemporaries, or as you talked to more students, I really saw from a distance that you noticed a lot of patterns and that there was a lot of validation in seeing, oh, this thing that I went through, everybody else is going through too. Or this thing that was confusing to me was confusing for everybody else. And then you kind of realize, hey, why is it that way? Or whereas in the beginning, you think these are only personal problems.
Yeah, because there's a little bit of taboo on it. And I think everybody feels like, oh, I should know better. I should know better. And there's a lot of shame around that. And thankfully now things are a little more open and less taboo. But you're right. There's so many situations that are hard to predict also and hard to anticipate, you know? So it helps that, you know, I can be kind of a big sister in that way and say, this might happen. What do you do when this happens? And imagine if this happens, how are you going to respond? Because at the end of the day, you only have yourself and your, you know, it's important to have that strong climb your own mountain mindset. Right. If you're, let's say you're in a writing session and people start being inappropriate, you're allowed to leave. You know what I mean? You don't have to stay. Right. Things like that.
And I think there's just so much fear about making one decision that will ruin your career, right?
Yeah.
I think there's so much fear that if I say this, my career will be over. If I do this, my career will be over. And I think, you know, one of the good things that comes with a bit more age in a sea of less good things is that you realize that actually very few things, almost nothing, is the end of the journey. Whereas when you're young, you think, if I don't sign this deal with Universal before I'm 29, it's over. Or you think, if I don't sign this song, it's over. Or if you think I get dropped from my label, it's over. Or if I leave my label, it's over. Everything is over. If I say something, I'll never get other people to work with me again. But what's interesting is that I think the industry feeds off of desperation, and they sense that, and they, especially A&Rs and like a lot of the people who are in the position to really ruin people's lives, you know, they sense desperation and they feed off of it. But then when you kind of detach yourself from that, good things start happening in the sense that, you know, I think there was a time when we thought like, oh, if you stop focusing on writing songs and doing this, you'll never get a song placed again. And this is, it's the end of that career to do this career. Yeah. But since then, you've had songs that were placed. And I think, but there was a very different attitude about it versus a few years ago, where the attitude was like, I need this to happen or my livelihood. Now it's like, and maybe you get even more done because of that.
Absolutely. Maybe not more, but better things.
Better things.
You know what I mean? I think I created more, but nothing was great. And I think the things I'm doing now, it's not as much. I don't have the time anymore. Yeah. But what I do is like so fulfilling and so fun and so great. And I think that fear that you mentioned also, it, you know, you see it in like the actual writing as well, and the actual songs and the actual music. Like there are so many people who write from that fear. Like if this isn't a hit, if, you know, then I will never make it. And so there's so little inspiration and just art, you know. What did Quincy Jones say?
Leave room for God to step through, or
exactly
to walk into the room.
Yeah.
There's very little, especially back then when put your hands up in the air.
Everything was
everything must be. I'm gonna fight it.
Yes, no, it's true, and and I remember that every time. Well, how do I phrase this? I got a lot of. There were people in my how do you say it? In my environment. I won't say who. Yeah. But, I got a lot of, every time I would see that person, it was like, you should sound more like Sia. You should sound more like Lana Del Rey. You should sound more like that. Every single time, and that just always felt so wrong to me. But I am too stubborn for that, so I wouldn't do that. But a lot of people are like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
And that's just getting you farther and farther away from what you are here to do.
Right. From your own voice.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what you help people do, literally and figuratively.
Yeah.
You help people find and express their voice.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Because imagine if Billie Eilish would try to sound like Alicia Keys or whatever,
Yes. Yes.
So that the most beautiful thing is always when you're true to your own voice.
And it is interesting to note that in her life, of course, she did it at home with her brother in a very safe space.
Yes.
She wasn't making these in some LA mega studio.
Yes.
She was literally at home with a towel over her head.
Yeah.
And they just made what they liked, and that ended up being very authentic.
Yeah. And that's definitely not a coincidence.
Not a coincidence, no. And the freedom to explore that.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's a pretty fascinating story for people who care to listen because, again, on this podcast, I don't want to show somebody who did something. Like, I would never want to show Martin Garrix's career on this podcast because it's, you start one thing, it's immediately successful, and then you're just the best in the world at it. Or that's not very unusual. It's not very helpful. Somebody's going to win the lottery tonight, and that's not very helpful to you guys. But I think it is helpful when somebody makes a decision or they make a choice or they combine the things that they're good at in some kind of new way and they take a stand for themselves. So that's why I thought it'd be good.
Yeah, but that's why I love your podcast, and obviously I've been supportive from the start. But I think what's so great about this is that, and this is something I talk about with clients in the beginning of the program, that what is your definition of success? Because it's too easy to say, I want a Grammy. I want to make $30 million. That's not really success. That's not really success. And I think what you do really well is you honor, what people's personal version of success is. And that can be so different from, for everyone. Yep. So.
And it's not just money. I'm proud of you. Well, I think, in case there's somebody out there, so, you work with singers, you obviously, and writers, but you also help people who have often thought that they could never sing, become singers. And you've taught a lot of people who thought, I could never be a singer, express themselves. And now they've got gigs and they're releasing music and they're even successfully releasing music. So if there's anybody who happens to be listening to this who wants to either work with you or to do anything like that, where can they find you and how should they reach out?
You can find me at vocalpsychology.com or on Instagram at vocal.psychology. Or at marujaretana.com. I don't know if you're going to have a link, because that's a difficult name.
Link, but Marujaretana. How do we never?
My theme song.
Wow.
Yeah, so I'm always open to meeting people who love to sing.
Yeah. So that's all. Do you have any last words?
Podcast. No, that's your line.
Last piece, you can say it. Last piece of it's borrowed from. Did I say that in another one? It's stolen from Iron Chef.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's a little Easter egg for the hardcore fans. I used to watch Japanese Iron. That's my favorite show as a kid.
Oh my God! If you have not seen Japanese Iron Chef,
the abalone battle is over. Yeah. If memory serves me right, the abalone should be prepared. the ladies sweat. Anyways, say
watch
it.
Watch
say
it.
The line.
Okay.
With that.
With
podcast.
Over.
Thanks for listening to the Beat the Often Path podcast. If you've been enjoying this show, please like, comment, share, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, subscribe to me on YouTube. It would mean the world to me. Also, do you have an unusual success story or do you know someone who does? well, please recommend them to me. They could be a future guest on this show. Maybe they've rolled the largest boulder down the mountains of Tibet, or maybe they built the world's largest chicken farm in Madagascar. The point is, I don't know what I don't know, so I'm looking for inspiration and unusual success stories. So help me by being a part of this adventure. I'm looking to grow this podcast with you. Thanks again for listening.